Why do you always fail to capture the images that you dream of? Or do you always get disappointed when you take a look at your photos back home at the computer? Or maybe some of the mistakes I'm going to cover in this video today is holding you back. Welcome back, my friends. It's time to grab a cup of coffee or tea or whatever you prefer and see if we can fix some of these mistakes. As a beginner in wildlife photography, you might have this dream of instantly being able to capture stunning images, but the truth is, especially as a beginner, we are making a lot of mistakes that some of them can easily be avoided, but we have to be aware of them. And as a beginner, I've made my fair share of mistakes. And in fact, all of the mistakes I'm covering in this video and in the next video, because this is a two-part series, these are mistakes that I personally have made myself. Nobody's perfect, but with a little bit of effort, we'll get there. In fact, I challenge you to see if you've made as many mistakes as I have over the years in wildlife photography. And if you find some mistakes that I didn't mention or I failed to mention, please add them in the comments. It'll be a great help for those just starting out. Now, mistakes sound pretty harsh, but it's often just a matter of not being aware of what to look out for. And it's often not just a single mistake that's keeping us from capturing stunning images or capturing images that we can be really proud of. It's often many small mistakes. So if we get rid of these mistakes one by one, then your images will be absolutely gorgeous. Let's take a look at them one by one. And the first one is actually a huge one. We might not think of this as a mistake, but in my opinion, it is. It's about getting settings confused. You know, when we start out, we are so eager to learn that we spend maybe hundreds of hours watching different professional nature photographers. What settings do you use and what do you do in this situation and what do you do in that situation? And we end up with a pile of knowledge that's one big mess. So when we're out in the field, we don't know what settings to use. And I have great respect for those photographers that are very technical. I'm not so technical in my approach, but the thing is, they explain maybe a video for each scenario or what to do when you come across this situation. Then you have to raise the shutter speed and you have to exposure compensate, and then you have to set a maximum ISO sensitivity and you have to use buttons like this. And there can be a lot of truth in that. But if in 99% of the scenarios we come across, we can do with the standard settings, then all these videos just adds to the confusion, especially in the beginning. I think it would be really wise of you, or I wish that I did that as a beginner, that I just, found one photographer and figured out what is the base settings he recommended, and then go with that and practice. Because that's really what makes the difference. If we just practice, and not really change anything other than maybe the shutter speed and the aperture. Let's look at how we can fix this. I use my basic settings for 90 or 95% of all the shots I take. Then there's a few scenarios, but as a beginner, we don't have to look at these scenarios yet. They'll come further down the line. I use manual mode with auto ISO, and I don't even set a maximum ISO sensitivity on my camera, because if I do that and the light gets too dark and the aperture is fully open and the shutter speed is also like the lowest I can keep it shot steady, if the ISO doesn't raise, then I'll get home with a shot that's totally underexposed. Instead of just letting the eyes raise a little bit above. I would like to keep that photo. It'll probably not be a winner, but I would like to get that shot. Let's make this very simple. Manual mode, auto ISO, with the aperture as wide as possible or at the sweet spot, depending on the lens. So I'm using a 400mm f4.5. So normally I shoot around 4.5 or maybe 5.6 to get that shallow depth of field. But if my lens was a little more maybe soft at that aperture, then I would step down to get that range where the lens is really sharp, being aware that I would lose some light. If the images are too soft, we have to do like this. Preferably, my starting point is as wide open as possible. And I change the shutter speed according to how fast the subject moves. And a good starting point is maybe 1/800 or 1/1600 if you have enough light. But 1/800 is a good starting point, and you adjust from there depending on if it's a really slow moving subject, then you go below or use a slower shutter speed. If it's a faster moving subject, you raise the shutter speed. My camera never goes away from using continuous autofocus. I don't want it to lock. Also, it never goes away from shooting in burst mode. The most amount of frames per second I can get still shooting in RAW. When it comes to focus mode, I use auto tracking for animals or for birds. And that's basically it, unless it's a very tricky situation like the animal is behind some grass. Then I might use as single focus point. But that's actually it when it comes to settings. Let's try to not overcomplicate anything, because it'll take the focus away from capturing stunning images using light and composition and storytelling. And if we look at settings all the time, then we'll feel insecure about the settings. And this makes us look even at more videos to get that confidence. And we forget to go out and actually take some photos. If I were to restart, I would go with these settings that I just mentioned. And then I would focus on fixing the other mistakes that's coming up before revisiting special scenario settings. The next mistake is not focusing on composition enough. But why is that a problem? Composition is the single most thing that makes your image stand out. If we don't think about this, then I think we'll probably end up with an image that's not strong and one that's, frankly speaking, a little bit boring. So what can we do about it? Let's take this also without overcomplicating it. First of all, in most scenarios, use the rule of thirds. It's such a huge help. It doesn't mean you have to do it all the time. If you have a symmetrical composition, or if you capture the animal straight on, then it might be better to place it in the middle. But most time, use like the third lines, and most cameras enable you to turn that on. So if you're just starting out, do that, then it'll come natural at a certain point, and then you can switch it off. But place the important points in the frame on a third line, for instance your subject, and if it's looking in a particular direction, then give it more looking space to this on the side that it's looking towards. That's such a huge or an easy trick to improve your composition. Of course, if there's it doesn't help much if you have really cluttered background. So keeping your subject on the third line, you might be able to just move a meter to the left or to the right and get a more pleasing background that's further away. Maybe even dark background if you're lucky, but just that it's further away, it throws the background much more out of focus, bringing more attention to a subject. Now, third thing, just a simple trick for getting better compositions is similar to look if you can also move or wait a bit so that the subject is not like behind another subject or just in front of another subject. Wait for the subject to separate a bit, or wait until it moves out of the branches and into a little more open space. So excluding the animal in this way is really powerful and simple. So that's 3 simple things. And if we using the rule of thirds, choosing a background that's further away, we also had looking space, and then separating the animal from other animals or branches. Then these 4 things will make such a huge difference, and it's a mistake not to pay attention to them. The next one is a mistake of getting too close. And this is not, let me explain. It's not a problem if you get close and get a frame-filling subject, but it's a mistake if you force your way charts towards the animal and scaring it away, because then you'll only get, what can you call it, butt shots. You get the behind of the subject as they're fleeing away, and that's not a good shot. So what can we do instead? If you, let me just mention 2 scenarios. If you're at a shore side, then if you go straight to the edge of the water, you might feel that, okay, I'm 3 meters closer or 5 meters closer, but slowly the ducks will move 5 meters further into the water because they're a bit anxious. So just pull a little bit back from the shore. That'll help a lot in making them comfortable. Let's say you're photographing a deer. Wait for the deer to get comfortable if it's a deer you can approach. Some run away just by the side of you, but that's another story. If you get a deer that you think you can approach, then instead of going straight towards it, wait for it to be comfortable with where you are, and then move a little bit to the side and look at something else. And then out of the corner of your eye, is it still comfortable? Then you can turn and move in the other direction. Then just zigzag your way 1 meter closer, and then you can actually get pretty close, or at least 10-15 meters closer than you were before, without the deer feeling anxious by your presence. Some animals you have to photograph from a height and just be patient and hope that the deer comes into the area where you can capture it. Again, that's another story. Let's move on to the next mistake, and I made that so many times. As a beginner, I was using a tripod. I wanted high quality stuff, even though I didn't know how to compose my image. I carried a tripod with me all the time, getting tired. Okay, why is that a mistake? That's your own choice. If you want to carry a tripod and get high quality photos, it's clumsy, it slows you down, and fiddling around with a tripod is often what scares animals away. It'll take time to set up, and most animal, deers, eagles are gone when you're ready. I only use a tripod if it's a really long session, and or if I need to capture great quality video where I can't move the camera around. But actually, most video I capture handheld as well, and just stabilize it in post. You can also lie down on the ground and get that perfect low angle perspective, or rest your camera on a beanbag or on your backpack. Let's take a look at the next one. It's good. Okay, now I also did this mistake 1,000 times, at least. I was so focused on not using a high ISO. I wanted it to be like ISO 100 or ISO 400 maximum. And with the aperture wide open, I only had the option of choosing too slow a shutter speed. And this meant I got a lot of photos with motion blur in them from subject movement. It took me a while to realize that I was a really bad photographer. I couldn't even get a shot of my children running or of a deer walking because they were simply not sharp. I was using 100 of a second for deers walking, and getting the shot is more important than a little noise. Again, I was a terrible photographer when I just started out, and I had some wrong beliefs in what was a good image. I thought it meant high quality. I guess you're not like that, but I'm just sharing my own mistakes here. Now, let's move on to the next one, and it's a little bit related. And this is, if you hold the camera the wrong way and don't support it fully to get rid of that camera shake, you can get home with sharp images but the composition is off compared to what you intended because you just wriggled the camera a little. And then if you're fairly close to a subject, it's like the bird is flying straight into the edge of the frame. So you have no looking space for the bird or flying space to fly into, because you're waving the camera all over the place. And stability is key here, and that's getting like this extra touch point of like resting your camera viewfinder just above the viewfinder. You rest it on the eye socket. I think it's called eye socket, and I'm not sure. Sure. Anyway, I have a whole video about how to properly handhold your camera. So I'll try to link it up here. Take a look at it. I think it could be helpful if you're struggling with that. The next thing that I was also suffering from for a very long time was overprocessing my images. I really wanted that extra bit of sharpness, even though my gear wasn't up for it, or if I cropped too much and not enough details. I added too much sharpening for those not so sharp images. It gives this kind of halo just on the edge of the fur or the animal, where you can see it's a little halo where it's a little brighter than the rest of the background. Also, I had the tendency to pull the clarity slider way too far to the right, so to bring in or force in those details, and it just looked awful. Simply awful. And then, as I just mentioned, because I wasn't skilled at getting close enough to the animal, or I didn't have a lens with long enough reach, and I still focused on getting this particular subject that didn't match my lens or camera setup. It was too far away, and it was just a tiny dot. I cropped in way too much. And then when you bring that up on a big screen, you come to think, this is not so good. Now, this next mistake is something that can eventually make you give up photography. So it's crucial that you get rid of this. Once you start comparing yourself to others, and especially in the beginning, you're actually putting yourself down and not recognizing the steps towards mastery of photography that you're actually taking. Instead, by looking at social medias and all the gorgeous shots that others are able to capture, there's some great and amazing images there, no doubt about it. But when you're a beginner, you're either probably pushing yourself down, saying, I cannot take photos like this and I'll never be able to. Or you're just feeding your envy or jealousy, and that's not really helping you. So what I suggest you do instead is that you stop looking at those photos and then just looking at your own photos month by month. Do I improve or not? And that's a comparison that you can actually use for something. If several months go by and you say, man, I haven't really taken any images that are better than what I took a couple of months ago, then you know you've like stalled. You're not improving. So you need to take a different approach or get rid of some more mistakes, or like try to do something a little bit different than what you're used to. The other thing you can do is that if you actually want to look at other people's images, then instead of just, wow, that's gorgeous, and then moving on, oh, that's incredible, and moving on, and not improving by this, only feeding your jealousy, then instead start analyzing their images. What makes them so special? What makes them so gorgeous? Take a look at the background. Is it close? Is it further away, far away? Or how's the light? Where's the light coming from? Is it front lit? Is there a hint of backlighting? Where's the sun actually? Just figure out for each image you look at, where's the sun? Where's the sun positioned? Where's the shadow on is the obvious shadow, or what the heck is he or she doing that works so well? Is he close to the animal? How did he get so close? What do they use? Or try to ask in the comments section, how did you get this close? And maybe he'll say, oh, I used a floating hide or something like that. Then you have some direction to looking at these images. You get a path forward, or what you should do to become just as great. Now, there's another mistake. There's equally as huge. I think I have missed 200 photography sessions due to this one, and that is not going. Finding excuses for staying in bed when the light is great. Maybe you set your alarm and you take a look out the window and say, nah, it's not going to happen today. You second guess the weather, and it'll be better tomorrow, but tomorrow you maybe are too wasted to get up, or the weather is even worse. If you don't get out, if you don't go out on try to capture some images, you won't improve. I have looked for perfect weather so many times, being inside. And then I slept an hour or two, and then I woke up. Oh my God, this is really gorgeous. I should have been out there, and I kicked myself up for wasting that opportunity. Another thing that you might recognize in yourself is that you're just playing it like by chance that you'll come across something. You avoid planning your photo sessions. Once I started planning, I think everything changed. Okay, instead of just taking a walk, it's fair enough to take a walk sometimes, but also some events happen so fast that you might miss them. There could be a bird migration. It could be grebes swimming with chicks on their back. It's only a couple of weeks. So if you want to help yourself and want to fix this of showing up too late, then a simple calendar helps you. And I actually made a whole video about my approach to using a simple calendar as a tool for taking better photos. And it's part of the exclusive content that I make, and I'll put a link to it in the description if you want to check it out. There's a secret to overcoming all these mistakes, and I'm going to tell you now what it is. If you try to do everything at once, you'll fail. You'll forget about half of them, and the other half you'll only do like half-hearted. So focus on one or two of these that you have identified that you're making maybe again and again, and see, okay, what should I do to fix this? Go out for a session, fix it, and then in the next section you can focus on the second point, and keeping in mind not to making the first point again. So you like build from where you are, instead of trying to like cram everything together in one session. If you can't remember what all these mistakes are, go ahead, rewind, choose one or two mistakes that you want to work with, take some notes, what the mistakes are and how to fix it. I put that for each of the mistakes, how you can actually overcome them. If not, you can scold me in the comments, but I should have mentioned how to overcome each of these mistakes. Pick one or two, get rid of them, and move on. And that's the road to mastery. It's really that simple. Of course, there's a little more to it, but you can get a really long way just fixing all your mistakes. Anyway, if any of this resonates with you, I suggest that you stick around, because I've made so many mistakes that I actually have enough for a whole other video. And these are a little more subtle and the things that keep you from moving beyond the okay level in wildlife photography. Watch out for that. It's coming up in a few days. So that's all I have for you today, and see you in the next one.